What is up, everybody, and welcome to the WPF Season 3 Post-Draft Power Rankings. My name is Mr. Murkrow, and I'm going to be your Power Rankings host for this season. And looking into all these drafts, I'm pretty happy with how everyone drafted. Of course, there's never going to be a completely perfect team, and there's negatives to every single team. And going through this from number 16 to number 1, I'm going to be building up from the teams that I think have the least good in them up to the team that I think's the very best. And mind you that every team I think does have some promise and also has some things that could cause them trouble, so there's no perfect team, and I want you to understand that. And this is also my opinions, so if you disagree with them, go for it. I mean, this is my first time doing a power ranking, so be gentle, senpai, but we'll get into it with the number 16 team, which is the Golden State War Turtles, coached by Wubbit. So his draft: Kieran Black, Tangrowth, Florges, Ninjask, Marowak, Megasteelix, Regice, Seismitoad, Gothitelle, Stoutland, Regirock, and Conkeldurr. So the reason this team is my number 16 team is there are a lot of picks that seem to be just kind of rather wasted picks. I really don't like the looks of mons like Megasteelix, Regice, Stoutland without sand. Regirock is okay. I think that Ninjask is extremely gimmicky, but it can work, especially on this team, being able to pass speed to things like Kieran Black, and maybe things like Marowak or Conkeldurr if they get a lot of boosts. But there are some bright sides to this team. I really like Kieran Black. It's a humongous threat. Conkeldurr, also a very big threat. Gothitelle's a very solid mon in the format since it can trap things and make Pokemon like Kieran Black all the more threatening by removing their counters. And he does have a fairly decent defensive core out of Tangrowth, Florges, and Megasteelix, and also Seismitoad and even Regirock. The thing with this team is it's very bulky, but like I said, there's just a lot of Pokemon that are weird that I don't really understand why he took them. Ninjask, Marowak I've never seen used in the format. I know it's extremely powerful, but the thing is it's slow and it can get worn down very easily, so I'm very interested to see how that's all going to play out, but it's a very bulky team. Problems elsewhere are he does not have a source of hazard removal unless Ninjask gets defog, which I'm not aware of. He's got plenty of stealth rockers, he's got good wish passing, he's got a very bulky team with some solid offensive threats, but overall just the quality of his mons are kind of lacking. And also he definitely lacks recovery on this team. Only a couple of his mons have instant recovery, so he'll have to rely on wish passing with Florges and Tangrowth, maybe. And Tangrowth just sponging hits to keep this team going throughout a game. Also, one last thing is, it could be very effective under Trick Room. The only problem is he only has one Trick Room setter in Gothitelle, so I definitely think that could definitely be a effective method to use this team, but overall, just not the most fantastic team in my eyes. But it still has some promise, and I'm looking forward to see how they will do. So moving on to number 15, I've got the Volt Zoroarks, coached by Dolphin, and his draft is Mega Blastoise, Togekiss, Volcarona, Cloyster, Bouffalant, Chandelure, Smeargle, Breloom, Abomasnow, Virizion, Braviary, and Quagsire. So this team is very interesting. First of all, he goes right away with two hazard removers in Mega Blastoise and Togekiss, both of which are very good at removing hazards. And then he goes along and picks a ton of Pokemon that require setup and are very weak to hazards. So this is a very interesting dynamic. Volcarona and Cloyster, both very susceptible to Stealth Rocks, both need setup to be effective. And I think this team has some promise, mainly because he's got two very scary sweepers paired with that good defense, or paired with two good bulky ways to remove hazards. But overall, I just kind of don't like the synergy of this team. There's some types stacking up. There's just a huge weakness to rocks. There's a big flying weakness, among other things. I'm not really sure why Bouffalant went so early or at all. I also don't really understand the Abomasnow pick, and also he has a Virizion and Breloom, which share the exact same typing. So there's a lot of weird picks and things like that, which I just don't quite understand. And another problem with this team is it's very slow and it's very, very frail. Aside from Pokemon like Quagsire and I guess Abomasnow to an extent, and Blastoise and Togekiss, a lot of mons are only going to need one or two hits to go down, and even Pokemon like Quagsire are very easily taken down by things like an HP Grass. And That leads into this team being extremely weak to Volt Turn, since its only way to block a Volt Switch is with that Quagsire, which Quagsire, not a great way to stop Volt Switching in the format, because most things that carry Volt Switch can carry a Hidden Power Grass that will hurt a lot, or another grass coverage move. So this team, it's very interesting, but I just don't like the synergy, and it's a little slow and weak to hazards for my forte. But still has a lot of promise, a lot of sweeping potential, and we're going to move on to the number 14 team now, which is the Colorado Rapidash, coached by Ossiel, and his team is Jirachi, Mega Pinsir, Milotic, Jolteon, Scizor, Zygarde, Empoleon, Weezing, Typhlosion, Dugtrio, Primeape, and Clefable as his franchise tagline. And also I didn't mention, but Quagsire and Conkeldurr were both franchise tags by the previous teams. So when you look at this team, you might be questioning, why is it so low? And the thing about this team is it just is like, it's a good stuffs team. It has a lot of quality Pokemon, but the problem is, I don't think they work too well together. He has a lot of type stacking, and he has some significant weaknesses because of this. I definitely foresee him having a huge time. It's going to be very tough for him to deal with things like fire, electric, and ground, because he just only has so many things to resist them, and he has a lot of things weak to them. He has 3 steel types, which I'm not a huge fan of, and he also is going to have a difficult time getting rid of hazard, since his only hazard removers are Scizor and Empoleon, neither of which are extremely reliable, since they can be taken down and whittled down quite easily. And also Scizor is best suited for an offensive role, so that would be taking away from its threateningness. And I just don't like the look of this team's synergy, mainly because of those common types, but there is a lot of promise for this team. Just because there's so many good Pokemon, I just don't believe that they're going to work too well in synergy with each other, especially when in planning you can find Pokemon and different movesets that can just easily pick apart these kind of cores, since there's so many similarities in what they can do. And Pokemon like Dugtrio, very interesting. Clefable is always a huge threat. Jirachi and Mega Pinsir, of course, is an enormous threat. So I definitely think this team will be able to rack up wins, but just from a standpoint of how the draft looks synergistic wise, I don't like it very much, but it does have a lot of promise. So with that, we're going to move on to my number 13, which is the Brighton Bronzors, coached by Draco, or Draco's a bitch, and his draft: Mew, Skarmory, Krookodile, Haxorus, Jellicent, Hitmonlee, Venusaur, Manectric, Porygon Z, Crawdaunt, Wigglytuff, and Mega Charizard Y. So, why is this team down here? The main problems I see with this team is it's really slow and it's really frail, and it has a very big dark weakness. I believe his only resists to it are Krookodile, Crawdaunt, and Wigglytuff, none of which are extremely reliable, as well as Hitmonlee. And I just definitely foresee knockoff spam could very well be a problem for this team. And it's slow, and one of the things I see is he does not have very many walls. He's got Mew, he's got Skarmory, and he's got Jellicent, and potentially Venusaur, but that's not very much wall diversity, as well as Wigglytuff, but that's not too reliable. So I definitely think one of the problems will be, well, it's not necessarily a problem, but kind of a shame that I think his Mew will have to be stuck into a defensive role most often, because he just doesn't have enough defensive Pokemon in his team to cover that role. Which, Mew is a fantastic specially defensive Pokemon, or any kind of defensive mon, but it's a shame when you can't expect Mew to use its versatility to its full extent. But positives about this team: he's got some pretty sick bulk. That Mew Skarmory core is very dangerous. He also has a lot of potent attackers. Hitmonlee can clean through a team. He's got Megazard Y, which is a nuke and a half, paired with Venusaur in the Sun, is going to be very difficult to deal with. And he has a lot of other scary Pokemon like Haxorus and Crawdaunt and Porygon Z. But one of the problems I'm seeing is, aside from Mew, this team is extraordinarily one-dimensional. There's just not much diversity that any of these Pokemon have, so it's going to be extremely easy to prep for common sets, because you really can't get too out of the box with these Pokemon, in my opinion. Of course, I could be surprised, but I just think it's not versatile enough. And also, wait, no, never mind. Another thing I like about it, though, is he has a lot of stealth rockers, and that Sun Core is very scary, along with he has 2 good defoggers for that Charizard, which is really nice because Charizard is definitely the biggest threat on this team, being able to fire off Sun-boosted flamethrowers or Fire Blast for men, and things like that, but I see some problems with synergy. His other best wall breaker, Crawdaunt, gets hindered by Zard's Sun, but things like that, but I still think this team's pretty good. It's just kind of lacking in something, I feel like. So we're just going to move on to the number 12 team, which is the Olympus Lucarios, coached by Peter or Justified. And his draft is Zapdos, Mega Scizor, Latias, Nidoking, Exploud, Trevenant, Diancie, Pyroar, Talonflame, Luxray, Dusclops, and Suicune as his franchise tag. So I think there's a lot of good things and a lot of bad things about this team. First of all, his offensive and defensive presence is very scary. When you have things like Zapdos, Scizor, Latias, Nidoking, Exploud, and Talonflame and Suicune, that's very hard to prep for. It's very scary because all of those things are very difficult to deal with. But the problem is that he has a lot of Pokemon that just aren't really all too good. I don't like Trevenant, and I also think it's redundant paired with Dusclops, so I definitely could see him dropping one of those, preferably Trevenant because it's not a very good Pokemon. But there's a lot of things that just kind of I just don't like the similarities. Luxray and Zapdos are fine because they kind of do different jobs, but I just dislike that Trevenant and Dusclops. Also, one major problem I see is that he's very weak to rocks, but he does have a lot of ways to get rid of hazards. But the main thing is that he's got a serious weakness to things like Dragon and Dark. His only resist to Dark is Diancie, and his only Dragon resists are Scizor and Diancie, both of which are easily taken care of by the common coverage moves that Dragons can use. And the main thing is, he really doesn't have that much in the way of stealth rockers. He has Diancie, which I'm not a huge fan of Diancie just because it doesn't do a ton and it can get worn down, and also Nidoking, which definitely should not be put into the stealth rock role because generally you want as much coverage as you can on Nidoking because it hits like an absolute truck. So I just kind of dislike how there's lack of options for things like Stealth Rock, and he just has some serious weaknesses that are very common and very difficult to deal with. So, and another thing is he is also very vulnerable to Volt Turn because his only ground type is Nidoking, and Nidoking, very frail, gets bought by an HP Ice, 2-hit KO'd generally, and things like that. But good things, amazing priority. Talonflame, Mega Scizor, both have fantastic priority. He has a lot of threats, a lot of threats, which I really like, but I just kind of dislike the latter half of his draft. I'm not a fan of things like Trevenant, Diancie. Pyroar is kind of okay, Luxray is kind of okay, Dusclops is okay, but there's just some picks that seem a little lacking to me, but it's fine, and I definitely think this team will do good. I just don't think it looks as good as some of the other drafts. So we're going to move on to the number 11 team, which is the Houston Dynamo, coached by Francine or Mr. Luminion, and his team is Raikou, Scolipede, Victini, Shaman, Feraligatr, Aromatisse, Gliscor, Hariyama, Volbeat, Azelf, Licky, and Mega Aggron. So what I really like about this team is it has a ton of Volt Turn, and the great thing about having a good Volt Turn team is you have threats to go out into, and he definitely does have threats that he can drop into, like Azelf, Victini, Scolipede. He just has a lot of options to apply offensive pressure, even Hariyama. And also he has every kind of hazard, which is really nice when you have a Volt Turn heavy team. So I'm definitely glad to see that. And also he has Mega Aggron plus 2 Wish Passers, which will keep Mega Aggron in the game, hopefully, because Mega Aggron, it's insanely bulky, but the only problem is that it just gets worn down because it lacks recovery outside of rest, which is not very good. Things that are a problem though, very weak to hazards, and he lacks a hazard removal outside of Hypercut or Gliscor, which is suboptimal, so I'm not too keen on that, but he definitely has a lot of promise in this team, a lot of very big threats that are going to be difficult to deal with. Victini is such a hard Pokemon to switch into because of its amazing coverage, and Stab V Create is intensely powerful. And Scolipede is a Pokemon you should never ever in a million years sleep on, because Adamant Life Orb Scolipede can just roll right through teams once it gets a speed boost. So this team has a ton of promise, and I definitely think it's going to be hard to prepare for since the Volt Switch is there, and it's strong, and it's spooky. So we're going to move on to the number 10 team now. And at number 10, I've got the LA Nidokings and JJ, and his team is Mega Venusaur, Dragonite, Starmie, Bisharp, Gyarados, Gardevoir, Kyurem, Hitmonchan, Houndoom, Heracross, Kecleon, and Claydol. So right off the bat, you can see he's got a really good Fairy Dragon Steel core with that Dragonite, Bisharp, and Gardevoir, and also Kyurem can fit in that slot. He's got a lot of potent offense, but it's really, the problem I see with this team is it's just offense. He really does not have a very good amount of bulk. He's got Mega Venusaur, and what does he have after that? He has bulky options in Dragonite and Starmie, but generally you want to be running those offensively. And he's got stuff like, he's got Claydol, and that's his only other dedicated wall kind of mon, which is not very good because it gets worn down easily and it's just kind of lacking. So I don't like the fact that this team has a serious lack of bulk, but what I do like is it has a ton of offensive pressure. And the thing is, he has both. One thing I really like is that he has both immediate offensive pressure and sweeping pressure, because he has things like Dragonite and Gyarados which can set up and sweep, and he has a lot of mons with instant power like Heracross, Kyurem, Gardevoir, Bisharp, Starmie, and Choice Band and Dragonite. There's a lot of things that are going to be difficult to switch into, and also he's going to have a really easy time hopefully keeping hazards off the field, because he has 3 ways to spin, so that's really nice. But also, the thing is, even though this is a very offensive team, he doesn't have very good options for Stealth Rock. He has Kecleon, he has Claydol, and he's got Bisharp. None of those are very good, and with a team like this, I'd really like to see Hazard Stack, or just at least a good Stealth Rocker, because he has so many things that are hard to switch into, that force switches, that it's just not the best combination of things, and also because he has Bisharp, I'd love to see Hazards so that he can try and force defogs and try and get Bisharp sweeps, because you know how scary Bisharp is at +2 for free. So that's his team. I really like it offensively, but it just doesn't have enough bulk in my opinion, so I'll really be relying on Venusaur to be sponging all the hits, which it can do, but it can be overwhelmed as well. And also, it's kind of slow, so those problems I think are he can overcome them, but it might be a little difficult at times against bulkier teams. So we're going to move on to number 9, and that is the Dallas Staryu, coached by Espelancer, and his team is Rotom-Wash, Tornadus, T, Donphan, Mienshao, Zoroark, Mega Gardevoir, Miltank, Ferrothorn, Emboar, Druddigon, Venomoth, and Electros. So what I really like about this team is he has a lot of Volt Turn, and he has a lot of really good wall breakers, and he has Zoroark. When you have things like Mienshao and Gardevoir, those things are super hard to switch into, and when you have Zoroark along with that, that just adds to some intense mind games, which is definitely something that can hinder opponents from winning. So I really like the aspect of Zoroark, Mega Gardevoir, because those two things on their own are just terrifying, because the head games are real. Another thing I like about this team, his options for slow and fast Volt Turn. So many Pokemon on his team have the ability to click Volt Switch or U-Turn. It's really nice to see. And another thing is he has annoying bulk, and what I mean by annoying bulk is things that don't die and things that are of pain to kill. Things like Rotom-Wash, Tornadus, and Ferrothorn. I really don't like Donphan at all. I've had a vendetta against not using Donphan because it's a terrible rapid spinner in my opinion, and that is his only way to get rid of hazards. So I definitely think hazards on his side could be a problem, just because Donphan's really easily killed in my opinion. So I definitely feel like if his opponents are able to set up hazards and put pressure on that Donphan, which is quite easy to do, then this team's going to have a lot of trouble switching in on things, because hazards are definitely going to be a problem. But still, really nice team, really big offensive threats, really nice bulk. So overall, solid team. And we're going to move on to the number 8. which is the Atlanta Breaks-In, which is coached by Kyle or Lugia X, and his team is Latios, Heatran, Mamoswine, Roserade, Cofagrigus, Honchkrow, Togetic, Porygon 2, Terrakion, Wobbuffet, Electrode, and Mega Gyarados. So I'm just going to automatically write off the Wobbuffet because I don't think it's very good, but it's okay to have a write-off Pokemon here and there on a draft of 12 Mons. But anyways, really like this team, looks really good, strong offensive presence. He's got stuff like Latios and Mamoswine, which are super hard to switch into, along with Terrakion and Mega Gyarados being all very big threats. And one thing I really like is his bulky core, and the fact that he has a lot of Pokemon that bait you into going for knockoff, and he has two really good switch-ins to knockoff, being Terrakion and Mega Gyarados, so he could definitely take advantage of that. Of course, it also could be a disaster since most of his bulk relies on a Violite to be really fat, so if he doesn't play it right, he definitely could be in for a tough time switching into Mons if he loses those Violites, but that is the risk running Pokemon like Porygon 2 and Togetic, but they're just so bulky that you just want to do it. But it's just a solid all-around team. I really like it. He's got a lot of threats, he's got a lot of bulk, and it's not the fastest team around, but it's not extremely slow, and he does have that Electrode, which I've never seen it used before. It should be interesting. Really fast electric type, can maybe force switch-ins if things are weakened, but yeah, just pretty solid. Only problems I see are that knockoff weakness is big, and he also doesn't have much for Volt Turn since Mamoswine is kind of frail unless you throw an Assault Vest on it and things like that, but it's pretty hard to not be vulnerable to Volt Turn unless you have a seriously good ground type to stop that. And also it's sort of fighting weak because of said knockoffs being a thing, but overall, really like the team. I think it'll do well, and we're going to move on to number 7, which is the Blackthorn Frogadiers, coached by Ioku, and his team is Mega Charizard X, Mandibuzz, Thundurus Incarnate, Vaporeon, Celebi, Spiritomb, Meloetta, Tyranitar, Lantern, Electivire, Purugly, and Excadrill as his franchise tag. Wow, that's a lot of spooky things. Mega Charizard X plus Thundurus plus Excadrill in the sand plus Meloetta. That is a lot of offensive pressure that he's going to be putting on the opponent, and I really like that. And paired with that huge offensive presence, he has a lot of bulk to go along with it. Problems I see potentially being a little slow, but having Thundurus there with Priority Thunder Wave is fantastic, and I really like Meloetta in the League format. It's a sleeper mon that is super duper good. Problems I see with the team are it's really weak to Edgequake. The only thing that really can take both of those is Celebi if it's physically defensive, but I definitely see that Edgequake could be a problem with this team, and it also has 3 electric types, which it's whatever, and I also really don't like Spiritomb at all. I think it's kind of bad, but I think it could do well on this team, but it's a pretty good team overall. A ton of offensive presence, a couple weird mons in there, like not a huge fan of Purugly, not a fan of Spiritomb, but I don't think they'll be coming all that often, so I'm interested to see if they will do something good when he has it. And one last thing is he has a ton of versatility. Mons like Thundurus and Tyranitar and Meloetta have a lot of options to choose from on their offensive move pool, so that's something very scary to think about, and it's very hard to prep for. So I'm definitely looking for big things from this team. Definitely going to be one of the harder teams to wall out just because there's so much offense on it. And now we are going to move on to number 6, which is the Jersey Devils, coached by Eric or Cloud Envy, and his draft is Sylveon, Salamence, Umbreon, Gengar, Thundurus Therian, Mega Gallade, Aggron, Slowking, Leavanny, Sandslash, Swellow, and Infernape. So what I like about this team, he's got a lot of strong and versatile offense. He has a really good bulky core, and he has, like I said, a ton of versatility. That's all very scary. Sylveon, a mon that can be defensive or offensive, and either way it's a bitch to handle. Salamence can do a ton of things, and I'm a humongous fan of Salamence. It's such a good Pokemon in the format. Then he has Umbreon, which is just a fat thing in the way, and he has 2 Wish Passers, which is very scary to deal with, and it also should let Sylveon be a more offensive Pokemon more often than not, which is nice because Specs Hyper Voice hurts. It hurts. He's got stuff like Thundurus, which packs a ton of punch. The only things that I'm kind of iffy about is that his team doesn't really love hazards, and his ways to get rid of them are kind of shaky. He's got Sand Slash, which can spin, which Sand Slash is okay. It kind of falls in the same pool as Dawn Fan, where it's easily taken advantage of, but I prefer Sand Slash since it's kind of lower value, but that's just my still opinion that I hate Dawn Fan. Salamence is definitely a good defog option. I've used it and I like it, but the problem is that you just have to sacrifice some versatility to use defog on Salamence, which is a little bit of a shame sometimes. Also, he could, if he's a real man, he could use Swallow, I guess, but yeah, it's whatever. It's a very flying weak team, which is something to look out for. He's got Thunderous, which is kind of a bad resistance, and Aggron, which can be taken advantage of. And my other question about this team is, at the time that he picked Aggron, Tyrantrum was still on the board. So I question why take Aggron when Tyrantrum is still there, because when you look at Aggron, sure, it's got high bulks, but the problem is its defensive typing is absolutely terrible, so I'm only assuming that he drafted it for stab head smash and maybe a solid stealth rocker, but if you're going down that route, why not take Tyrantrum? It's so much better. It's faster, it's stronger, it's insanely good, but so I'm a little curious with that, but I think overall the team's really good. Good bulky core, good offensive core, good versatility, just good stuff in general. So we're going to move on into the number 5, which is the Louisville Noivern, coached by Advent, and his draft is Weavile, Mega Altaria, Tentacruel, Rotom Heat, Superior, Doublade, Blissey, Sableye, Ambipom, Ditto, Magnezone, and Gigalith. I really like this team. I like it a lot. It has amazing synergy offensively and defensively. He has one of the better offensive OU cores in Weavile, Altaria, and Magnezone. I don't think it can be as effective, as the point behind that is Magnezone trap steals so that Weavile and Altaria can completely run through teams, which is a little easier to prep for just on the side of you can throw a Shed Shell on anything and boom, you're not trapped. But this team is very threatening, and the thing I like about this team is that right off the page it doesn't look too amazing, but when you look at this team and you think about it, this team is really good. That Weavile and Mega Altaria put a ton of pressure on the team, and Superior is one of the most dangerous Pokemon in this format, just because if you're not prepared for it, it can just start spamming Leaf Storm and ending your entire career. And also, he has a fantastic Fire, Water, Grass core, Tentacruel, Rotom Heat, Superior, good stuff. And he also just has a bunch of other miscellaneous bulk. I like Doublade, I like Blissey, I like Sableye. He's got a really good knockoff switch in that Altaria, which is cool to see. Ditto and Ambipom are both very interesting mons in my opinion. Ambipom, not very strong, but has a lot of coverage and serves as a cool little pivot since it has a high base speed and Technician Fake Out. And Ditto is fantastic for counter sweeping and also scouting sets. So I really like the look of this team overall. Problems, he only has one way to get rid of hazards, which it's Tentacruel, which is not the worst way to go, to be honest, and no, Mega Altaria does not get defog, but the thing is, Tentacruel is a really good rapid spinner, so I don't see a huge problem with that, and also his team isn't super duper weak to hazards anyways, but it could be potentially annoying. But overall, I really like this team, and I think it's going to do very good because it's just one of those. I really like it mainly because it's a sleeper team. It has a lot of things that fly under the radar, but overall, it's constructed very well, so I'm excited to see how it's going to go for Advent. So we're going to move on to the top 4, starting with number 4, and the Chicago Cub Chews, coached by Yumi, and his draft is Manaphy, Goodra, Mega Absol, Heliolisk, Granbull, Mismagius, Crobat, Delphox, Escavalier, Nidoqueen, Sock, and Slowbro. Wow, it's really good. First of all, he has Manaphy, and anyone who has Manaphy is probably just going to be able to pick up some wins from the get-go just because they have a Manaphy, since it's so inept at just sweeping teams on its own because it's such a huge threat with offensive Tail Glow sets or defensive Calm Mind Rain Dance sets, which are both extremely tough to deal with. And also, I really love the fact that he got Goodra along with it because it pairs so nicely with Manaphy, sponging up its 2 weaknesses like they're nothing at all. And then I just really like how this team looks. It's got a lot of speed, it has a lot of versatility, a lot of power. I'm a huge fan of Mega Absol. I love Heliolisk. Granbull's a good defensive Pokemon. Mismagius is okay. Crobat's really good. Problems I see, maybe lacking a little bit in the it's lacking some instant recovery, which is a shame. It would have been cool to see maybe a Wish Passer along with Granville. I guess Delphox does learn Wish, but it's not very good at it. Slowbro is a really cool mon to see picked up at the very last second, and my only gripe is that he does not have Amoonguss, and Amoonguss is available. So I definitely think that I'd like to see him drop something like Delphox or Miss Magius, since they sort of do the same role, and pick up Amoonguss instead, so you could have a 6/6/6 Slowbro Amoonguss regenerated core, which would be amazing. But I really like this team. The only problems aside from that, he only has one Stealth Rocker and one Defogger, so it just kind of limits what he can do with that. And his team doesn't especially appreciate hazards, so that could be a problem, putting a lot of pressure on that Crobat. But I think it's a pretty cool team, and he does have Absol, which does play some mind games with setting up hazards if it's in its Mega form. So that's all cool to see. Really looking forward to this, and I think it's one of the better constructed teams in the league. So now we're going to move on to the top 3, and starting with 3, we've got the Baltimore Blastoise, coached by Ryan, and his team, gross. It's Garchomp, Cresselia, Arcanine, Klefki, Galvantula, Mega Sableye, Blastoise, Lucario, Tornadus Incarnate, Scrafty, Leafeon, and Chansey. I don't know about you, but when you see Mega Sableye, Chansey, Klefki, Arcanine, Cresselia, and even Garchomp, and even Blastoise on the same team, you're just thinking, holy shit, how am I going to break through all of this fat stuff? That's insane. He has so much bulk on this team, and the thing that makes it scary is, along with that bulk, he has a lot of offensive presence. Arcanine is a very strong Pokemon, Garchomp is a huge threat, Galvantula can put a lot of pressure on teams, Blastoise, not so much, but Lucario and Tornadus Incarnate, all really good stuff. I don't like Scrafty at all, it's a waste of a Pokemon, and Leafeon kind of the same way, but aside from that, 10 Pokemon that are all really good and very hard to deal with. This team is just so bulky. How can you have such a bulky team? I don't understand it. It's insane. Problems I could see is that he doesn't really have a whole lot for setup sweepers. So I think the best way to break through this team would just be spam the shit out of setup sweepers and just try and break down those walls and then sweep through him. And but the thing is also, if you prep too much for that bulk, you could just get completely stomped by the offense, and if you do the other way, then you're not going to be able to break through the bulk. So very, very difficult team to break through, it looks like, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this team just outlast everything and then break the weakened teams with that really nice offense. So let's move on to number 2, which is the Gateway Gardevoirs, coached by Carlos, and I adore this team. It's Azumarill, Hydreigon, Entei, Megalophony, Metagross, Hippowdon, Reuniclus, Snorlax, Drapion, Aerodactyl, Flygon, and Ludicolo. This has a lot of good stuff. I really, really like the look of this team. It has a fantastic mix of speed and bulk, and it's just a really, really good looking bulky offensive team. Things like Entei, things like Azumarill, Metagross, very hard to switch into, and then he has good revenge killers like Hydreigon, Megalophony, and even Flygon and Aerodactyl, and then he has other Pokemon that you don't really know what to expect, like Snorlax. Reuniclus, you can run a couple different really good sets, and it's really scary. This team looks amazing. I absolutely love it. He has some good status absorbers, like, I didn't mean two, but he has some good status absorbers like Reuniclus. He has a really good thing to just stop hits in Hippowdon, and also Reuniclus if he wants to go with the defensive set. He has 2 really good win conditions in Calm Mind Reuniclus and Curse Snorlax. Those things are very hard to stop once they get going, and overall this team just looks fantastic. He has a little bit of everything, and I really, really like it. Only problems I can see are his hazard removal isn't that great. He's got Flygon and he has Aerodactyl. Those are the only things that can defog, but at the same time, his team isn't super weak to rocks, but he does have things like Entei that would prefer to not be taking rocks upon switching every time. So that team, I really like it, and I think it's going to do extremely well if played right. And now we're going to move on to the number 1 team, which is the Tottenham Hoot Hoots, coached by Vito. And wow, this team, just bear with me. So this team is Espeon, Fortress, Darmanitan, Megamanectric, Gastrodon, Staraptor, Whimsicott, Tyrantrum, Sneasel, Toxicroak, Rotom, and Landorus T as his franchise tag. So you may be looking at this team and questioning, why on earth would I have this at number 1? There's a lot of weird picks and a lot of weird placement, but the thing is, this team overall is just incredible. It has so much Volt Turn. It's amazing. I've never seen this much Volt Turn on a team. And the thing with that is he has Volt Turners, and then he has nukes to drop in on that do a ton of work, like Tyrantrum, Sneasel, and Toxicroak, which both have a difficult time switching in on things. He's got Staraptor and Darmanitan. Espeon was the league MVP last season, so that's under Coach Vito, so that's the reason he took that first. And this is just an incredible team overall. It's just got so much Volt turning and so many threats to go out into. It's insane. He's got 3 separate wall breakers in Darmanitan, Staraptor, and Tyrantrum. And then he has frail setup sweepers, or just frail attackers, in Sneasel and Toxicroak. Get them in for and Espeon. Get them in for free, do a ton of damage, get out, and keep on Volt turning around. This team is just insanely good. Problems, maybe. It's definitely weak to hazards, because his only way to get rid of them is with Fortress, which is not the best spinner. Definitely question why it went so early, but it's easily taken advantage of by an HP Fire. But get a Suicide Rapid Spin off and then start applying a shit ton of offensive pressure. I'd be okay with that. This team, it's just awesome. I really love the look of this team. Things like Tyrantrum and Sneasel and Toxicroak are Pokemon that you should never ever sleep on, because they have a ton of power packing behind them. And I just love how offensive and scary this team is. And I definitely think that teams are going to have a huge problem just walling everything on this team, because if you Volt Switch around, drop in a nuke something, get out, keep Volt Switching and keep U-turning around, drop in another nuke, kill some more things, and then that's how you just win games. So I love this team. I love the look of it. Definitely could be overwhelmed if he meets a faster offensive team, but this team is just going to be very tough to get the upper hand on if Vito is able to apply the constant pressure that this kind of team needs. So it might take a little skill, but I just really like the look of it. So that's the Season 3 post-draft power rankings. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I have not done this before, so I might have been a little shaky, so forgive me for that, but I'll be coming back with you for the Week 1 power rankings after Week 1, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Peace.